Good morning, everyone. This is Julie Shore, President of Career Development Advisors, and welcome to Next Step Wednesdays. If you're joining us for the first time, I just want to introduce myself. So my firm is located in South Central Pennsylvania, but I serve clients all across the U.S., and we focus on retained recruiting for organizations. We do Kolbe team development and coaching, and we do outplacement and career transition services, working both with individuals and organizations. And every week we entitled the show Next Step Wednesdays because I hope to give you some motivation. It's the middle of the week. Sometimes your energy is dragging. And so we're happy to be here with you today. And for the month of September, we've been featuring special guests and learning about their career journey to hopefully give you some inspiration. And I am so excited and fortunate to have a former colleague and friend of mine with us today, Ellen Vance. So Ellen, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you could be with us. And Ellen has, as does everyone, a unique career journey to share. And so we just, again, are going to talk a little bit about Ellen's background, your story, and I guess to get us started, Ellen, if you just want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself, you know, your educational background, your first job, and kind of how you got started in your career.
Sure. Well, I'm greeting you guys this morning from Daniel Island, South Carolina, where we've recently relocated. It's right outside of Charleston. It's a suburb of Charleston. And nonetheless, down here in Gamecock territory, I'm still a very proud Hokie. I graduated from Virginia Tech. I had dual degrees in sociology and psychology because at the time there was no degree in human resources. I started out thinking I wanted to be a teacher. I changed my mind really quickly just before I graduated from high school. So I went into college not really knowing what I wanted to do, but I had taken a sociology class in high school that was interesting. So voila, there was my major. You know, the really important decisions in life are made sometimes on the fly. So anyway, I studied at Tech, graduated, went to graduate school at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and studied educational psychology and guidance. Knew then that I didn't think I wanted to be a teacher or a guidance counselor. So then what? So when I left UT, I came back, I found a job in the midst of a horrible job market in the mid-'70s as a medical receptionist until I could find an opening. And I finally found an opportunity about 9 months later as a recruiter, employment coordinator for a major hospital in Richmond, which was a nonprofit hospital. It's now owned by Bon Secours Mercy. So I had probably about 18 months there of hiring every type of medical employee except a, floor nurse. I hired all the specialty nurses, but I wasn't deemed qualified to hire the floor nurses. They had to have an RN to do that. So that was a bit of a chuckle for me, but loved what I was doing, but it paid horribly. So I was afforded an opportunity at a bank in Richmond, which was a regional powerhouse bank. It's now owned by SunTrust. I think every place I've ever worked is owned by someone else now. But anyway, I went to the bank and leveraged a good career there, rising to vice president, and I was a regional HR manager. So I left there when they eliminated my job soon after my son was born. And it was quite a ride. And then I stayed home for about 10 years and tried not to work. And the harder I tried not to work, the more people found me to do odd jobs for them, HR related. And when my son entered middle school, my husband and I switched roles, and he retired and I went back to work. Worked for the American Heart Association as vice president of HR for one of their affiliates, which was 5 states. Then I left there and went to work with Julie over at the Titan Group. Worked there for several years and then got hired by a client at another hospital. So nonprofit, for-profit, private, public, I think I've had a foot in every door, and gotten something out of each. So is that a quick run through of my background, Julie?
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Okay. You kind of came full circle there, starting in healthcare and sort of ending in healthcare. And you know what, Ellen, we're probably taking something for granted. Human resources. So for the benefit of maybe people who aren't sure exactly what HR does, would you like to share? Or should I say what HR doesn't do?
Well, HR touches everything in an organization. There's nothing an organization does that doesn't impact its people, whether it's IT upgrades, how the sales model unfolds, how the marketing is done. Everything is a reflection on the organization. And so therefore, all of that relates to HR. I really had a great opportunity. My last position that I mentioned was at a hospital. It was actually really, to your point, Julie, very much full circle, because the hospital where I landed in my final career opportunity was actually one that was co-located on the grounds of the first hospital that I worked for. And we used to do the staffing because at the time, Sheltering Arms Hospital was a free hospital for the indigent population in Richmond, and in the 80s reinvented itself and became a rehab hospital once Medicare and Medicaid kicked in. So I really did come full circle. But my opportunity there was as the Chief Human Resources Officer, and I had a CEO who believed and understood that HR was part of everything. And so I was often his first go-to before he would, make any sort of strategic decision. He always wanted the HR perspective, which is why I was fortunate to sit on the executive team. And strategic decisions, mergers, acquisitions, again, marketing, how we marketed, what did it say about us as a place to work, because being a top employer, an employer of choice, was very important to us. We won that 15 times. We had 15 awards in the 10 years that I was there. So it was a really critical part of the entire life circle, or, life ecosystem of the hospital. And so, yeah, there's really nothing HR doesn't touch.
Yeah, and I think HR encompasses so many areas. And so, well, first of all, I'd also like to call attention to, for people who are listening, you've heard me say there's not a straight line in anyone's career journey. And Ellen, I don't know if you would agree with that, the best laid plans always change. And was there a pivotal point in your career, or something that kind of made you think twice, that you can recall?
Well, absolutely. Having your job eliminated can be a real deafening sound. It's a very emotional thing, because you keep thinking, well, what did I do wrong? Well, you didn't really do anything wrong. You just were in the wrong seat, at the time when companies were doing what they're doing now, re-engineering, scaling back, reorganizing. It was a big thing in the early 90s. And, you could either look at it as devastating, or you could look at it as a gift. And for me, it was a very pivotal gift. I was fortunate enough to be able to stay home. I had a 5-month-old child. I mean, what a gift is that? I would never have had the nerve to say, I think I'll drop out of the workforce and stay home. And this was before the days of telecommuting and work from home and part-time and job sharing. The 90s, if you remember, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act didn't even go into effect until 1993 in terms of, maternity leaves and things like that, the early evolution of the Family Medical Leave Act today. So there were no protections for us as female employees in the workforce. And so you had to figure out, how to make the best of it. And I was extraordinarily, I guess, blessed, really, to be home and figure out, okay, how do we live on one salary? My husband was a civil servant. And how do you live on one salary with a newborn and a mortgage and a car payment? And so, we learned frugality at its best. So, give me a zero-based budget opportunity and I can show you how to go. So, for me, it was a pivotal point because it gave me the opportunity to be at home and raise my son. And yet people kept calling me, would you help me? I've got this little, side opportunity for you. I need to recruit a job. We don't have an HR department in our company. Would you fill a job for us? Would you do this recruit? Would you do this outplacement for me? Could you work with this candidate? Could you help me write a resume? And so I was able to just, the harder I tried to stay home, the more I got phone calls, and it was actually
finding you.
Because work found me, and that was the value of the network. And so I can't emphasize enough, how important having a network is. That was a real pivot. I can't say that word today. A pivotal opportunity for me, and yet out of that, good things came. So don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think the other thing is our values. I know for me, and last week I shared my story, but our values change with the different seasons of our life. Mm-hmm. And you probably surprised yourself. I know when I was in a similar situation, I surprised myself too. How did we make this all work, right? And I think sometimes it's good to kind of take a step back. So with your experience, Ellen, is there anything, so kind of thinking back, is there anything that you would do differently or would have done differently or changed about it if you could?
I gave that some thought, Julie, and although I love the path that it created for me, it probably points more towards the trend in thinking right now, sort of the gift from the millennials, that job loyalty didn't really pay off. And so I applaud the millennials for figuring that out early on. And I think if I had done anything, I probably would have changed jobs more in the early stages of my career to help me really define my likes and what I really wanted to pursue, in the HR track that I was in. I think that, having an economy like we had at the time probably drove job security more than anything, because the markets were tough back then. Jobs were not plentiful. There was not as much expansion going on, but I think if I would do anything differently, I would have broadened my horizons earlier.
Absolutely, because the more we see, do, and experience, to your point, Ellen, you kind of figure out what you like, what you're good at,
right?
What your strengths are. Absolutely, and a lot of that takes experience. And so when we are coaching individuals, they say, "What should I be? Do you have a crystal ball?" I'm like, no. Your experiences are going to help you do this. So one quick question I'm going to ask you as an HR executive leader that maybe folks listening are wondering is, so to the point you just made about job loyalty, sure, it's not there anymore. You don't see it as much. But the opposite trend that sometimes we see in recruiting is too much job hopping or too many job changes. Do you have any feedback or comments on that to anyone who's listening and considering a change?
I do. I mean, I don't think, for most people, a learning curve in a new company is going to run 6 to 9 months, depending on where you are in the organization. I mean, sure, on, day 2 and day 1, you can find the restroom and you know how to use your, card and things like that. But to understand
Right.
the organic um, bottom lines of the company and what drives it and how it, how its model works and how the different pieces, particularly I know in healthcare, there are so many moving parts in a hospital. You've got to really give it a little while to
Mhm.
figure all of that out so that you're really proficient enough to say, okay, I have packed my backpack sufficiently from this company and now I can take it and move on. I don't know that there's a specific number of days, months, or years that you should work at a company, but you need to look at really, have you gleaned everything that you can glean from that company before you say, yeah, I think I'll just move on. Um, and I think that does take some time, and you've got to give it a little bit of time to learn those lessons, because there are lots of lessons to be gained in every company. Good lessons, not always lessons of success, but watching how companies fail can be a really good learning point to know how not to let history repeat itself in the next company you work for, and what are the warning signals, and market share and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know that there's a magic number, but I really do, as an HR executive, I don't like to look at a resume and see that they've changed jobs every 12 months.
Right.
I don't think they could have possibly gotten entrenched enough to know they liked it or didn't like it in 12 months, or gotten lessons learned in 12 months.
True. Very true. So do you have a personal motto that has sort of stuck with you, whether it's informally or formally over the years?
Um, I guess the personal thing that I try to live by, I feel like I have received many blessings in my life. I don't come from, a independently wealthy family. I come from a very um, hardworking set of parents. Both my parents worked, which was unusual back in the day. My father owned his own business. So I feel like I was given many lessons that way, but I've always tried to live by the saying that much is given, much is expected. And I try to do that by giving back. I've done a lot of work for my alma mater. I believe in the alma mater, the obligation to give back to to a institution that helped me land. And Tech has a wonderful motto called Ut Prosim, which is translated from Latin as that I may serve. So, I try to give back because I feel very grateful for the gifts that people gave me along the trail.
That's terrific. Then coupled with that, you probably are answering my next question in terms of what would you say have been sort of your top values that you've tried to really, I know you said service, obviously, but any other personal values or work values that have sort of driven the decisions you've made along your career?
I would say there's several. I think one of my ones that I try hardest to adhere to is seek first, understand. That's a value to me. You've got to understand before you can act. I'm not a ready, fire, aim person. I also, I grew up with a dad who was a perfectionist, and he always would say to me, Ellen, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right, which really translated, I guess, in my career to, do the right thing at the right time, the right way. HR is very much driven by that, I believe. And I think, above all else, you've got to be passionate and compassionate. And so I value having passion for something. I try to be compassionate in my decision making. And I look for people on my team who have a passion for what they're doing and who can be compassionate Um, every situation in HR, whether it's hiring or terminating someone, you've got to do it with grace. It's a person's life, and you're impacting it. And so those are some of the values that were sort of guiding lights for me along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. People always remember how they were treated, perhaps not what you say, right?
Right.
I know that I learned early on as well.
Yeah.
So, any parting words of wisdom, Ellen, for someone who is maybe they're currently in a role, but just feeling like they're stuck, or maybe with COVID, it's like, they're stuck working from home and now they're like, yeah, I'm not a work from home kind of person. I need to get out and about. So maybe someone who's currently employed but nervous to make a change. Any words of wisdom there?
Well, the thing about age is perspective. And, I guess I would encourage people to be bold. I mean, do what you love. Life is short. And if you don't like what you're doing, take a chance. The worst thing you can do is fall on your bottom and get back up. I mean, it's the same thing your parents taught you. When you fall off the bike, get back on the bike and ride it again. So, there's no harm, no foul in trying something. And certainly in a job interview, there's no shame in saying, I tried the job. I just didn't love it. And, if you love what you do, you're really not working. But I do think it's important to have a backup plan. So, have a plan A and a plan B. If you're going to take the risk, make sure you have a fallback plan. How am I going to, how am I going to deal with if I don't like the job and I want to leave it? Make sure you know how you can escape. Always have an escape plan. You live in hurricane zone like Charleston, you have an escape.
Right.
You got to have the same thing in life. You've always got to have backup plans. And but don't, at the end of the day, be afraid to take a chance. You'll land. You'll always land. Look around you. I mean, do you see people who are just walking unemployed forever and ever and ever? No, good job. You'll find something, but life's too short not to do what you love.
Absolutely. And while we have a few more minutes, if anyone has any burning questions for myself or Ellen, feel free to chat those in and Chrissy will take a look-see there. But I think, to your point, and so much of what I work with folks on is exactly that, Ellen. I feel like you've been in on my conversations that life is.
We hear everything.
That's right. Life is too short to be miserable, and that's one of my passions. And now I'm even focusing on how can I help some of these high school kids, because the knee-jerk reaction has been, let's just send them to college, and then they don't know what they want to do, and then they change course, which I know you've seen as well. But that, you've also raised a couple other really great points that, and this includes our next steps, guys, that we talk about, that your network, Ellen mentioned, is so valuable. Reach out to someone in your network this week. I did a whole separate segment on networking. And in fact, I think it was an insurance company in our area. Several years ago, they had a billboard that always stuck with me. It said, know us before you need us. And so that's what I think is so true. I mean, Ellen and I worked together, gosh, Ellen, like 11, 12 years ago, quite some time ago. And we've always kept in touch. And Ellen has sort of been an informal mentor to me, and I'm forever grateful. And we just kind of pick up where we left off. And so she's always been very kind and giving, as she said, and generous to me. Even back when I was doing HR consulting and I would have a fire like, Ellen, I don't know what to do. So she was always very helpful. So, that value of your network, not just when you need something, but just sharing and getting advice or feedback now more than ever is so important. Yeah, and truly, Ellen, I really appreciate that and what you've done. So,
I think, Julie, just real quickly, I can't underestimate the point that who you work for is so important. And people are so busy researching companies and what the job involves. Find out who you're going to work with. Find out about the person that's going to give you your work assignments every day, because they can really make or break your happiness in a job. So make sure you really do feel good about the person you're working for and with. It's critical.
Absolutely. And yes, so the saying goes, again, very cliche, people leave bosses, not jobs. And when you're interviewing or checking something out, absolutely, you want to be in that position that this is a conversation and you just want to see if it's a good fit. And as a quick aside, I always encourage my job seekers to ask the question of the manager, say they're meeting with, so could you describe for me kind of how do you interact with your team, like daily, weekly? Because the minute you ask someone, tell me about your management style, the micromanagers say, I'm not a micromanager. Inevitably, I don't know, Ellen, if you've seen that, but I've seen that time and time again. I'm like, yeah, that guy kind of is. But
top of mind.
So I think, if we think about 5 steps you can take this week, reach out to someone in your network, tell them thank you, tell them, thank you for being my colleague, my friend, my reliable resource. Go back and take a look at what are your top 5 values and are you able to make those work in your current position. The third thing, ask people who know you best. What are the top 3 things they think of when they think of you? What are you good at? What are your strengths? Solicit other people, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, what have you. The third thing is really think about what is stopping you. Oftentimes we stop ourselves because of our own mindset, actually. Mm-hmm. So often we can negate ourselves pretty quickly more than talk ourselves into something, right? And I've had many people I coach over the years say, Julie, you make me feel uncomfortable. And at face value, that does not sound good, but it's because I'm stretching you or pushing you to do something a little bit differently. And without growth, growth naturally makes us feel a little uncomfortable because it's not familiar. And change one thing in your search, or maybe you've just thought several times this last month, gosh, I really need to get a resume together. And or if you're in an organization where you're just feeling like, to Ellen's point, you're just watching the market, you're feeling like maybe something's going to happen, be proactive in that search and really dust off the cobwebs on that resume and begin to reach out to your network and really think about what could you do and where are those transferable skills.
Mm-hmm. Good advice.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen, for your time today, as always. And for anyone who hasn't visited our website, it's just careerdevelopmentadvisors.net. And in October, I'm going to be starting some power classes in a group setting, which gives you an instant network. And we're going to be addressing the 4 most popular topics, which are resumes and cover letters, networking, LinkedIn, and interviewing. So if you'd like more information, feel free to send me an email or just fill out the really brief field on my website. So I hope you all have a great week. And thank you again so much, Ellen. You look wonderful and happy and enjoying life in South Carolina. So thanks again.
You're most welcome.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.